It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Well, we've been talking a lot about parental guidance on the Happy Families podcast. I so very much wish that Kylie could be with me for this conversation because she wanted so badly to hear what I'm going to talk to Detective Superintendent Jayne Crossling about from the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, otherwise known as ACE. If you missed it, here's the background. On Parental Guidance, Season 2, Episode 1, the kids are given a device and told they can go and play a game for an hour. While they're playing the game, somebody approaches them in the game with a really innocuous, easy to enjoy name like pizza and says, "Hey, should we play?" And then tries to get information from them.
Your online name is Pizza and you're trying to establish a relationship with Funny Animal. Maybe start by introducing yourself.
My name's Lily. She said her name's Pepper.
That's information she shouldn't be giving out.
She's told me a suburb already.
Ask if she knows the local shopping centre.
Yeah, she says she does.
Okay, keep building the relationship. See if she'd like to meet you at the shopping centre.
Oh my God.
She said yes.
This was all done with the help of ACE, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. And you will remember, if you watch the show, Detective Superintendent Jayne Crossling walked into the room. Everybody sat up straight and knew that they need to listen because the Australian Federal Police were in the room to talk about kids using their devices. It was a really powerful, maybe one of the most powerful parts of parental guidance. And that same wonderful Detective Superintendent Jayne Crossling from ACE joins me right now to talk about how it all came about. So, Jayne, if we were to dive straight into just where did the idea come from? Did you approach the show? Did the show approach you? How did this happen?
The show actually approached us, and I really have to credit the producers and their line of thinking. So from season 1, the Stranger Danger episode that you featured around the park and the dog,
right, and
how powerful that was, and I have actually seen that episode myself. Stranger Danger messaging's been around for 20 plus years for young people, and even with that, these children still, unfortunately, were manipulated. So to the producers' credit, they said, well, if that's happening still in the real world, what's happening online? So it was actually the producers through our media unit that approached us.
Okay, so they've come to you and said, we've got this idea. Can we do this online? How did you come up with the idea that you were going to create an avatar and have somebody approach the kids? Like, where did this idea develop from?
That is all credit to the covert operatives that you get to see a glimpse of one in the episode, plus a whole team behind all of that. So they were very much responsible in conjunction with the producers to come up with those particular scenarios. And you can see from having watched the actual episode just how incredibly impactful they were.
Oh, like amazing. I'd love to know, a lot of people have asked me this question and I've fumbled my way through an answer. I'm guessing it has something to do with the word covert. You said covert operatives. Is there a reason that we can't know who the police officers are? Is there a reason that we had to have an actor being instructed by the officer rather than the officer engaging with the children themselves?
This is just best practice to keep the identity of covert operatives who work in any crime type, because, of course, we use covert techniques across a range of different crime types to locate evidence, to identify offenders and hopefully locate and rescue victims globally in this particular crime type. So that's just a very much a protective measure that we don't want them to have their real world life impacted by their online activities that they do professionally. And we, like most law enforcement agencies around the world, implement best practice when it comes to operational security and the personal security of the operative themselves. So I think based on the particular operative that you see in the episode, she felt much more comfortable with having someone action her requests rather than do it herself, because she realised even though it was in an entirely simulated environment, it is pretty impactful to be yourself manipulating children in that way.
Now that you say that, it's actually making my heart kind of palpitate and cringe a little bit. Like that, I can imagine they're dealing with people who actually do this and now they're stepping into that role. That would be terrifying.
Yeah, so I think from time to time they do need to pretend that they are actually engaged in this type of criminality. But I think for a self-preservation action, by getting an actor to do it, and we hope for the actor's sake that it's not too traumatizing for him to have been part of such a thing, that hopefully he can see how important the outcome is, and that it's really been a highly educative episode, I think, for everybody.
For those who haven't seen it, it is still available on 9 now, and it will be for some time. I can't recommend watching it enough. Jayne, when the operative instructed the actor to approach the children one by one as they participated in these activities, we saw some kids refuse to engage. They didn't really play the game at all. We saw others engage, but they lied to the actor and did a great job of keeping themselves safe. But we saw 2 families where the kids gave away the farm. I mean, they just told the actor everything, and one of them even wanted to meet up. Were you surprised when you watched this happen with these families and these children to get this outcome?
Look, I know from the reports that we get here at ACE, I know that it can happen very quickly, but the fact that in a simulated environment, the kids, and as you say, 2 of them in particular, reacted the way that they did and responded so incredibly rapidly to the questions that the actor was asking, really, really troubling. And it just sort of shows that we've got a bit more work to do, not only as a law enforcement agency, but as a whole community.
Jayne, let's talk about the situations as they occurred. We had one family, the Lighthouse family, whose child wanted to go and meet up at the local shopping centre. And then she walked out of the room and told her parents, and they obviously were able to have a really important conversation about it. When you look at that scenario and you compare it to Kat, the honest parent, her daughter lied about what was going on in the chat and completely covered it all up. Kat had no idea until it was shown to her in the room. When you watch that as a person working in the environment in which you work, what advice do you have for parents around, number one, minimizing the information disclosure? Obviously, that's critical. But number 2, making sure that the relationship is open enough that the kids will tell you, as happened with the Lighthouse family, as opposed to Kat, the honest parent, not knowing. I mean, this could have ended in literal, legitimate tragedy.
Yeah, so very, very different outcomes for those 2 different scenarios. So in the Lighthouse family, the sort of very upfront that this has happened, that's fine. But we certainly had concerns, and I raised that in the episode, that they assumed that because their daughter doesn't have access to games in the household environment, that she's safe in the whole universe. And I think for them that was a real wake-up call. They cared and they were very concerned, but they just hadn't necessarily got around to having that conversation yet. So that was certainly an opportunity for the Lighthouse family after that. And there are other children, of course, in the household as well that they can extend those learnings out to. The situation with Kat and her household, I think I can see why it impacted Kat as much as it did, simply because they had conversations before about sharing information. So I think Kat was probably more in tune with the fact that there are risks out there, and the fact that not only did Billy respond far too well to the grooming process, yes, there was that element of lying. But as I say in the episode, I wonder if part of it is because when Kat's come back in the room after Billy's time is up, and she's got a very heightened sense of in being very inquiring, I suppose, and saying, what did you do and what is this? And I think Billy felt a little bit on the back foot, and that she needed to explain her behaviour and minimise her behaviour. And it just shows that even in a household where there's been open conversations and Kat's right in characterising herself as an honest parent, it doesn't mean there's any failing. It just shows that you have to have these incredibly regular conversations. It's just such an unfortunate situation with the ever-evolving nature of the way that kids interact with devices. It's not as if you can have a set and forget kind of conversation. It has to be a continual conversation as the technology and the risks both evolve.
This advice feels so important. What kind of feedback have you had at ACE in relation to the show? And I don't just mean from other officers who are working with you, but even from the community. Have you had a sense of how the show has been received in the community?
I absolutely have. I have to say that it's been incredibly and overwhelmingly positive. I have had people reach out to me from high school to say that they saw it. I've had peers and people in child protection reach out to say, what a good job that we, and it's certainly not just me, it's definitely the covert unit as well, well, obviously, we worked with the producers to get it where it was, and yourself and Ali. So that's been incredibly positive. I've had NGOs and other stakeholders send me emails saying that they tuned in and that they thought it was done very, very well and that it was very impactful. But in terms of really tangible, action-based outcomes, we've had a massive surge in people visiting the Think You Know website. We've had a surge in schools and groups actually committing right through to booking in a presentation. So this means a face-to-face presentation in predominantly school environments, but not exclusively, where we actually come in using our volunteer model and give a face-to-face presentation. So for us, the bookings have gone through the roof, which is exactly what the model is designed to be. We're based all around Australia. We're looking to onboard even more volunteers off the back of it who are interested in the program. So, for us, it's been such an incredible positive impact on Think You Know and the awareness of it. So we're incredibly grateful for that, and I think it'll have ripple effects for some time.
I'm so grateful to hear you say that. We will link to Think You Know in our show notes, and even hearing you talk about how you've had people say, we want to book presentations to teach this stuff. I'm sure that a lot of people who will listen to the podcast right now who are in education maybe didn't even know that was available. And so we will link to that in the show notes as well for you, Jayne. Feedback that I've had has been continual, and essentially the feedback has been, we've talked to the kids about this lots, but it wasn't until they saw it happen that they realized how serious it is and how easy it is. And I wonder if there's anything that you would react to in that response from parents around just the vision, just watching someone have the experience and how real that made it.
Yeah, so look, we've been saying for such a long time, and we have some really basic safety tips, and one of them is the need for parental supervision. So we will continue to talk about that. But the other thing that we talk about a lot is that it's actually not a child's role to keep themselves safe. So parents and adults in a young person's life have to also step up, and that means educating themselves. So I think hopefully the kids are more aware, particularly if they took the opportunity to watch this show with their family. And I think that I've seen some of the commentary on social media suggesting that did happen, and I think that sounds really positive. But also I hope parents realise that if they perhaps have been passive or even burying their head in their sand, which we know that can happen as well because technology can at times be incredibly daunting and overwhelming, we hope that some parents have realised, actually, no, you've got a really critical role in this. You can't bury your head in the sand. Technology is not going away. You need to find ways to engage with your young person and start what might be a very uncomfortable conversation. And, as a parent, we're going to have all sorts of uncomfortable conversations. It's not just going to be on technology.
Yeah, welcome to parenting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So if that's the case, and if you acknowledge your role in all of that, we've got loads of resources. So the Think You Know website has so many resources on how to actually start that conversation, and it's never, ever too late. So don't imagine you have to get in at the ground level. Go getting into the ground level is ideal, we would say, and that's another question we often get, is like, how early is too early? Well, it's actually not early as soon as they've got access to a device that can connect to the internet. That's it. That's all we say. Or that, they're going into an environment where they're going to have access, and particularly the risk of access without that parental supervision. So we've had an opportunity to really reinforce that message that the parents have such a key role. And that's a real struggle for some parents to get their head around when they're very, very busy. We absolutely understand that. And I can understand the frustration that parents must have, saying, you mean we've got to sit down with them and do this? And it's like, actually, yes.
Yeah, I reckon just watching the show, though, is all you need to get that conversation going. I think that we've probably started a couple of 100,000 conversations around the country just as a result of that episode. So great work. Love talking to you, and so very much appreciate that you've taken the time to just do a bit of a review of what happened in episode 1. Thank you, Jayne.
Thank you.
That's Detective Superintendent Jayne Crossling from the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, or ACE. We'll link to them in the show notes. You can Google them. Make sure that you're having this conversation. It just matters so, so much. For more about making your family happier, don't just visit ACE, visit happyfamilies.com.au or the Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families Facebook page for more.